Good evening and welcome to the Icecast Live. My name is Shane Chebsey and next to me is Mr. Ollie McMoney. How are you doing, Ollie?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you, Shane?
Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah.
We've got a great guest tonight in the form of Mr. Dan Abnett, haven't we? But we were also supposed to have Paul Davidson, the artist, on the new Vampirella book, which sounds absolutely amazing. But unfortunately, Paul couldn't make it tonight, although he might be able to make it later on. So we'll see how we get on. But Dan is in the studio waiting to be let in. But before we start on the podcast tonight, I did want to just mention a little bit about next week's show. I don't know if you're aware of this, Ollie, but we've got...
I look shocked at this point. Who have we got next week? Who have we got the show before Christmas? A nightmare before Christmas.
So we've got Mr. Charlie Adlard,
Never heard of him.
Walking Dead fame, who has released a new art book called, strangely enough, there we are, Charlie Adlard Drawings and Sketches.
It's not called Win the Signed Copy then.
But you can win a signed copy. And the way that you can win a signed copy is that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. So if you're watching this on Facebook, all you need to do is, after you've finished watching the live show, hop on over to YouTube and subscribe to the Small Zone channel where the Icecast Live is hosted. The other way that you can win a copy is that next week we will be posting a tweet. And if you share, or as it's retweet, the tweet about the book, that will also enter you into the competition. And there are 3 signed copies to win. So it's really easy to play. And hopefully, if those of you are listening, one of you will be a winner. So next Thursday at 8 o'clock, it's Charlie Adlard and editor Tim Pilcher. So we're really looking forward to that. But in the meantime, let's get on Mr. Dan Abnett. So run VT Sam. And welcome back to the Icecast Live. And welcome, Mr. Dan Abnett. How you doing, Dan?
Doing very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on. This evening I'll be playing the role of both Dan Abnett and Paul Davidson. I have a special hat, and there will be puppet work. So,
is there a special accent that you have to put on? Is he got
not if I want to get out of the studio alive? No.
So for anyone who's been living on Mars and who doesn't know what the show's about, we're here to talk about primarily to talk about the new Vampirella, The Dark Powers, which is out momentarily, I believe, Dan.
Came out yesterday,
Possibly even yesterday, yes. Ollie's right. Yes, yesterday, yes. That is allegedly it. Yes, obviously we're just killing an hour here because you've got much more interesting Charlie Adlard next week. But
I didn't say that.
We are talking to hi Zalax. Vampirella: The Dark Powers. One of the least likely things that ever happened on the history of comics, but is proving to be an absolute delight to work on. It's one of those. you'll ask me some questions about it, and I will confess my initial horror about it. But yes, it came out yesterday, first issue. It's a 5-issue series, monthly, written by me, drawn by Paul, beautifully drawn by Paul.
Yeah.
And I believe it's already started to sell out all over the place. I think
Really?
Midtown Comics and same places in New York were saying they're out of it already because it's just it's picked up a kind of buzz, which is fantastic news because it is the most unlikely possibility, and he's part of a larger structure of.
There we are.
There we go. There's one of the 47,000 covers.
Oh, there's a lot of covers, isn't there? Yeah.
It's Dynamite. That's what they do. They do it very well. This is one of Paul's covers. Which is beautiful, graphic, and full of the sort of brutality that you could come to expect from A, him, and B, the story.
You can definitely say that what's on the cover is a representation of what's in the comic there.
Almost literally, yes. We have some more variants there, yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah, Vampirella the Dark Powers is just to sort of frame it. It's part of a larger structure. So Vampirella the Dark Powers kicks off this month. And then carries on through the next 5. But next month, a what should we call a sister or companion book kicks off as well that will also run for 5 issues. They'll be running simultaneously, and they will be telling not the same story, but they will be telling associated stories that run side by side about the same unifying theme.
And this is part of the Project Superpowers.
Yeah. This is where it came from. The whole the incongruity. That's a lovely cover, by the way. The idea of Vampirella, who is may wear a costume, but essentially isn't a superhero by any stretch of the imagination. Has never really been a superhero in any part of her long and illustrious history since 1969, 1970. She is not that. No. And I've been working with Dynamite for quite a while now. I was approached 2 years ago by Nate Cosby, who's one of their freelance editors, and he said basically he wanted me to write Deja Thoris, the female lead from the John Carter Warlord of Mars books. Right. Now I love Edgar Rice Burroughs, love the Mars books, and so it was a treat, even though I knew that traditionally Deja Thoris had been done as very sort of a good girl comic. And I thought, well, let's see if we can drag it slightly back to the kind of proper world building of Edgar Rice Burroughs and explore the lovely complexity of that. So I started writing Deja Thoris for him. That's still running, and check it out because that's a good book in its own right and is proper Edgar Rice Burroughs stuff. But anyway, whilst I was working on that, getting on very well with Nate, he said to me, "Look, if I gave you some component ingredients, one of which would be Vampirella and one of which would be the Project Superpowers, what could you do in terms of concocting a story that used both of them at the same time?"
It's a challenge,
and it was a challenge. I have sort of had greater, but it's that kind of crossover things where it's like, can you hybridize? Can you mash up two things and make them work in a story? And sometimes the answer, if it's I don't know, Superman versus Spider-Man, the answer is always yes, because those two things fit together really nicely in terms of genres. And sometimes the crossovers are so unlikely that they work anyway. But it's something I've done a lot in my career, and I don't balk at it. But looking at this, I was going, there's just a really odd fit here. Vampirella, horror, sexy, supernatural, not superhero. The Project, for those of you who don't know, Project Superheroes is a proper superhero team of fair size, which is based on a whole bunch of characters from sort of the 1920s, 1930s, early 1940s.
Right, okay.
They are the archetype superheroes who are now have long since in the public domain. In fact, in the cases of some of them, we don't even know who created them. They were created.
Really?
They're pre-DC, any of that sort of. They're really, really early superheroes. In fact, some of them are the templates of characters that have since become famous. So they are the kind of the archaeological bedrock of all superhero comics. There's some of them are more famous than others. But anyway, because they're out of public domain, Dynamite over the last 10, 15 years, I think, possibly even slightly longer than that, has tried to bring them back and do things with them. And they've done several books which are worth reading. They've done some really quite good things with them. One of the best things they did was they got Alex Ross to redesign them or bring them all up to date. So there is a wonderful multi-page set of turnarounds of the characters as Alex Ross has invented them or reinvented them just from their original costumes. And they've tried to do things with it, and it's been moderately successful. They've never turned it into a really big hit. And so Nate said, "Is there something we can do with Project Superheroes? Because they're great characters, even if they're at the moment quite thin. They're underdeveloped and they're very old and forgotten. But to do something with it, and could you do something? So basically, what he was suggesting is, can you take Vampirella, who is a known quantity that sells books, and kind of make it Vampirella and the Project Superpowers, and and I went, let me think about it. Particularly when he added the third ingredient, which we'll mention in a minute, what the third ingredient of this was. And I went away and I thought about it, and I honestly thought it was just going to be one of those things where it was just clunky. It was going to be a really bad fit, that it was either going to cause a sort of I would be forced to do things. I'll start that sentence again. I would be forced to do things to Vampirella that I didn't want to do. Do you know what I mean? I would be forced to alter her character in the way she's portrayed that would take her out of her own continuity. And there is at the moment a great Vampirella title being published by Dynamite, written by Priest.
Yes,
I didn't want to sort of spoil that.
Right, got you.
At the same time, I was thinking, I also don't want, if the idea is to sort of rehabilitate Project Superheroes, I don't want to make them look like idiots by making them the joke characters. So it becomes Carry On Screaming with superheroes, and I didn't want that either. So I thought about it, and after a couple of days, I came up with an idea, which I then went and pitched. I said, okay, here you go. Here's my best shot. And I pitched it back to Nate. And to my surprise, he could see the sense of it. And I went to that. So the basic premise of this event, call it if you like that, this event is that the Project Superheroes are this big, not so much Justice League, but Justice Society of America type, massive, world-saving. So they're all veteran, noble, proper superheroes from the golden age, the absolute golden age of heroes. They are, they're fantastic, towering figures of superhumanity. And the project is their organization. That's what they call it. And the tweak I've made is that they're not just Earth's mightiest heroes, but each one comes from a different planet Earth. So they're each the greatest hero of their Earth in a very sort of universal type thing. So the whole idea is that I call it the plural Earths, and each Earth in each dimension eventually produces one or more metahumans, and that's the sign of them reaching sort of civilized maturity, cultural maturity. Right. And at that point, the greatest of those heroes is then appointed as the representative to the project. So it's a bit Legion of Superheroes. So they work in this multi-dimensional base, and they protect all the Earths, which they've got a technology called doorsteps. They can guess like stargating from one to another. And they do that, and they look after the plural worlds, and that is their responsibility. So it's quite a cosmic uplift of the concept, and it's good. We've got some great things going on there. So that all works. And the basics of my story was that on one of the recently discovered Earths, which is essentially our Earth circa 1969, 1970, very sort of hippies, very, very late Vietnam, that kind of stuff, has just been contacted by the project. And they're looking around to see who the local superhero representative is. And there isn't one. The only metahuman they can find is Vampirella, as she first appeared in the 1960s, early 70s comics campaign, at her most sort of savage and sexy in a world that doesn't have superheroes, because she doesn't know what superheroes are. They're a bit silly. Yeah. And so as we join this comic, which you showed some pages of just now, as you join this, she has sort of been, against her will, recruited as the representative of her world. And she does not like it. And she's also the first member of the project who's remotely supernatural. Her powers are demonic and supernatural. They're all science heroes. Yeah. So they go, she's a vampire. We shouldn't have her. She should be a villain. Yeah. She shouldn't be a member of this. So they don't like her. And she doesn't like their uptight undies on the outside.
All Boy Scouts.
All Boy Scout type attitude. Yeah. But so they've even forced her, as you've seen in one of those covers, they forced her to wear a sort of superhero version of her costume.
I saw that,
for modesty's sake. Because they think her costume's too revealing. And they say it's not a proper superhero costume. You can't go around with cleavage like that and all this kind of stuff. So they're trying to make something. She keeps complaining that it chafes and she doesn't like it. And so that's the premise. So the premise, basically, that's the technical. There it is. There you go. That's looking.
That's a great cover. That is
great, and I love the expression on her face as well.
He's just about tolerating that costume. Yeah, but there you see, we've got Rocket Girl, and we've got fighting Yang.
Put it back on, Sam. Yeah.
This is that's the Liberator there on the left. Black Terror, who's one of the most famous of those early characters, and then the Lady in Red, who is a telepath and this kind of stuff. So they're great characters. So, for instance, the Fighting Yank up the top there, he comes from quite clearly an American War of Independence era. So that's at the tech level of his Earth. So he's technologically, but he is a great hero of his day. So they all come from. So some come from futuristic Earths, and some come from different historical periods.
So it's a real mixed bag of
real mixed bag,
culturally as well and historically.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's my technical solution to the problem that Nate presented me. But the real solution, as far as I could see, was to get over this kind of lack of fit, as it were, the fact that it didn't really fit really well, was to say, let's lean into that. Let's just make that the point of the story. And that's something I've done. Exactly. It's something I've done a number of times. When I was writing Nova for Marvel, Nova was a sort of third or fourth tier character. I loved Nova, but he was never a big character like Spider-Man. And I thought the best way to try and make him more popular would be to have him as a character be aware that he's not as famous as Superman. He's not a Premier Division 1. And when I did that, it suddenly made him more interesting. And the book became more popular. When I had scenes like when there's a scene where he returns to Earth after the Annihilation War, where he's powered up and he's really quite powerful. And then it's Iron Man, and Iron Man says, "Oh my god, you're clearly a force to be reckoned with." Now, and the readers responded accordingly. They actually upgraded Nova's reputation in their minds because it was happening in the story. Similarly, when I was doing Aquaman for DC, I love Aquaman as a character, but there is always the problem that he is essentially the silly member of the Justice League.
He does get a lot of stick, doesn't he?
And he a lot of tries.
Even now.
He's the naff one. He's the one who talks to fish, and he's got he's the one that's most easy to. I mean, I think was it Adult Swim made a career out of making Aquaman jokes. So when I was given Aquaman as a regular gig, again I lent into that. I just went, okay, what if Aquaman, who is an incredibly powerful and terrifying figure, realizes that the surface dwellers in the DC Earth think he's silly. They fear him because he's from the sea, but they don't think he's cool like Superman. They think he's the idiot who talks to fish. And to have him and again it worked because suddenly we were able to see have Aquaman see himself from the way that some people see him and combat that. So I thought, well, that's what we do here with this. Vampirella should not work in a superhero context. So let's make it a story about how Vampirella doesn't work in a superhero context. And it is a serious, let me tell you, it's a serious story, and the world building has been done very seriously. I'm quite pleased with some of the things we've set up, and the characters of the project, although there is a lot of humor in it, but it is a serious story. And the characters of the project are serious characters, and I'm trying to show that they're cool, they're good, they're not the butt of the joke all the time. Because it would be easy to go down that road. It's too easy to do that, and then they end up looking ridiculous, which defeats the purpose of doing the book. But at the same time, Vampirella is struggling with this, and in the first issue, you saw some pages of the first issue there. In the first issue, she's doing her best, and she keeps doing things you think they're going to be impressed by. She knows they kind of hate her. They keep whispering behind her back because she's a vampire. She can hear them, and she goes, "They're idiots." I can hear them saying that. They're going, "What sort of vampire is it?" They take a team photograph, and one of them says, "Is she going to come out on the photo?" They have no idea what she is, and they suspect her of being a wrong one. And she knows it, and so she keeps doing these things where she's trying to sort of do her bit. And so, no, I can do this, and she's sort of not. It's not her fault, but she keeps screwing up. So in that first issue, we see her get to the point where she goes, "This isn't for me. With the greatest respect, fuck off. I'm leaving, but I'm not going to go before I've cleaned my own mess up because I made a terrible mess." So she basically goes rogue, and the story spins on from there. And the reason. Sorry, shut me up when I've said enough. The reason that format works really well is the third ingredient that Nate wanted me to introduce, which is, and I'll the little teaser now, what the second book is that comes out in January and runs parallel. The second book is Red Sonja, the Superpowers. Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out. I mean, Vampirella was hard enough to make fit, but how the hell do you make Red Sonja fit?
Well, the thing is, the mechanism is exactly the same. Red Sonja and Vampirella are two of their best-selling characters. So the original brief was, can you take both of them and mix them up with Project Superpowers. And I went, well, it's difficult enough with one because they not only do they both not fit, but they both they don't fit. Neither of them fits in different ways. So actually, it's not the same story at all. But Red Sonja, the Superpowers, which starts in January, and I've just seen the first issue of, and oh my god, that is just awesome.
Who's doing the art on that one?
It's Jonathan Lau, who's been a regular Red Sonja artist, and he's doing the most beautiful job. And actually, it is sort of the same premise. That is to say, on the Hyborian Earth, which the project's just discovered, they go there because they've detected a metahuman, and they think it's time to recruit them. Although they think it's a bit early because it's pre-industrialized, and they're a bit worried about it. And they're on a mission to try and find this metahuman. And on the way, they discover Red Sonja, who isn't a metahuman. Let's face it, she's not in any way, shape, or form.
No, she's just got a sword, basically.
She sort of gets involved in the story in such a way. She demonstrates such courage that by a little way into the story, they go, do you know what? She'd be a much better recruit than this thing that we think is going to be the recruit. So she, and this is happening at the same time as the Vampirella book, she also gets recruited to be the hero representative of her Earth. And she also doesn't like it because she doesn't get it because everything's freaky. She's never seen technology before. In fact, she doesn't. This is a thing that I've done in the book that I absolutely love, and it's the source of, to me, some of the greatest humor in it. Vampirella doesn't even speak the language. I'm sorry, Red Sonja doesn't even speak the language. When we read a Red Sonja comic, she's obviously speaking
translated.
Whatever. So when they
really
meet
good
up
observation.
We hear her talking at the beginning of her comic in her narration and her dialogue, and we go, okay, so far so regular Red Sonja or Conan, that's fine. And then she meets the project, and they start saying things to her, and she doesn't understand them. And when she speaks to them, they don't understand. So they go, translators on. They turn the translators on. And from that point, she speaks like because she's Hyrcanian. I can't remember exactly what it is, but basically it's like she's meant to come from the Russian steppes. So she speaks in a Russian accent. And so her dialogue from that point on, when she's talking to them, is this kind of butchered English where she's trying to get her point across. And it makes her such a strong character. Because she expresses herself as like, I don't understand how this magic works and all this kind of stuff, you know. And so that's what happens. These two books are running. The connective tissue is the Project Superheroes, which is essentially recruited two outsiders who probably shouldn't be there. And you know, without giving anything away, you know that at some point the immovable object and the unstoppable force are going to meet with hilarious results. So that's the premise behind the whole thing. And I have to say, once I got that idea in my head, I started going, actually, that's really, really fun. And I'm having immense amounts of fun with both books because the way each character doesn't fit into a superhero team is different. It means that each book allows me to explore different aspects of what superheroes are and why it wouldn't work. Why doesn't it work for a barbarian with no superpowers from a primitive world who has no knowledge of technology, and why it doesn't work for a supernatural being who's feared by the very people that she's been recruited by, and also how if you take the Project Superhero out of it, they have crossed Vampirella and Red Sonja over in the past, but if you take Project Superheroes out of it, they are sort of sworn enemies in as much as there's nothing that Red Sonja hates more than witchcraft, sorcery, and demons. And what's Vampirella? And so it's like it's an accident. It's a very funny accident waiting to happen.
I mean, it's just so ripe for great situations, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the great thing about having characters like that who are sort of fish out of water, so to speak, is they are a great view-in for the reader as well, aren't they?
Well, that's yes. Thank you, Shane, for cunningly pointing out the technique I was employing there. But yes, it is that. It's exactly that. If part of the point of these books is to showcase how cool Project Superheroes is, what better way to get to know it than through the eyes of characters that we know quite well who are seeing it for the first time. So again, it's like win-win-win all the way through. And I slightly mocked just now the Dynamite's habit of putting like 407 million covers on each issue. They are the variant kings. But the variants are great, and you'll see this, I think, also on later issues of Vampirella and on Red Sonja as well, is that some of the variants have allowed us to do covers that are just gorgeous because they are kind of jokes or homages to superhero comics using unlikely characters. And if we only had one cover each issue, I think we'd have gone, well, that's a great idea, but we just need something more conventional to sell the book. But because
there's not enough issues to get all these cover ideas.
Oh, we actually get to use quite a lot of them. So there are some of those cover arts I think are going to make great posters. In fact, there is one, I don't know if we've got any reference to it, but when you see it, you'll love it. It's the same artist has done matching covers for one series and one for the other, which is the character sort of in the guise of a classic superhero, but all the people around them are all the citizens. Instead of Superman swooping down, the citizens are going, "Oh my God, it's Superman!" It's Vampirella swooping down, all the citizens are going, "Oh shit, run!" And it is an inversion of all those sort of tropes. So
we've got some of the covers. Sam, do you want to show the covers again? Just run through them so viewers can just have a look at some of the ones we've got there. I mean, there are some beautiful artwork, and I don't know all of these artists. Dynamite really do find some interesting artists.
They do. I think they often do. They often scout around, and I think it's one of the other pluses of variants is they actually give opportunities to artists who probably would be too unconventional for the single cover of a single book, but actually as a variant cover would be really, really nice indeed. I mean, that's obviously a showing exactly what she thinks of her alter costume. In fact, I think she goes through 3 costumes in the course of the book because she's got a classic costume,
right?
She's got a superhero costume that she's given that she complains chafes, and then she's got a kind of hybrid one where she sort of improvises a costume out of whatever she's got to hand because it's the only way to do it. There's the woman in red again.
That's by Peach Momoko, isn't it? That's a lovely cover, that is. Because she's just been snapped up by Marvel as an exclusive artist. So I think to actually have some artwork out there that isn't going to be Marvel for the next 2 or 3 years is quite a bit of a coup, really, on Dynamite's part. It's wonderful.
I really like that. We've had a few comments in on the chat from Jarification. I've been reading your stories since Gaunt's Ghosts, Dan. Cheers, pulling all your comics too.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, the Gaunt's Ghost is obviously the Warhammer stuff that I've been writing. Yeah. I've just last year published the 15th novel in that series, and it keeps going. So that's far too much time for a grown man to sit there.
We've had another comment here from Woody Young. Dan, you could write history books, and I would still read them. Super excited to start exploring your comics. Thanks for all you've done and continue to do.
Well, that's very, very kind, Woody. Thank you very much.
Nice
indeed.
Comment, isn't it?
Yes.
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say somebody commented the other day that I could do a comic about concrete setting and they would read it, and I think that was a compliment.
I take it as a compliment.
Maybe he's talking about the Paul Pope character, Concrete.
Yes.
Paul Chadwick. Paul
Chadwick. Yeah. I love Concrete. Actually, it's a great.
There you go. Maybe that's what they were referring to.
And it's actually tomorrow night's guest actually commenting here. Do you request artists, Dan, or are they assigned by editorial? Do you get to request particular artists for certain books?
That's a very good question. That varies massively all the time, depending on who I'm working for and under what circumstances, stuff like that. So for instance, I do a lot of regular work for 2000 AD, which I love doing. And there, quite often the artists I'm working with were originally assigned by Tharg. It was a suggestion that I work with this person or that person. But with so many of them, Richard Elson, Mark Harrison, Ian Culbard, and Phil Winslade over on the magazine, I have developed such a working relationship with them that it's like, what are we going to do next? It's kind of like we're in our team. You know, we have a sort of simpatico. We work together. So that is a lovely thing to have those ongoing relationships with people where you know that no matter what you're doing, you can have a great sort of mind meld on the telephone and really get the best out of each other. And in fact, I spent most of my day doing that with Ian Culbard about Brink and some of the stuff we're doing there.
Can I just butt in and say how marvellous Phil Winslade's artwork is on Lawless? I mean, you must be blown away with every page that comes in.
Absolutely.
I mean, I know it's a cliche to say he's doing the best work of his life, but I've seen him say that on Facebook, so I'm paraphrasing. It's absolutely stunning, that black and white art. I don't even know where to start on the page some days.
No, he's extraordinary stuff. I've known Phil for a very, very long time, But we sort of never really worked together. It was really very weird indeed. And he had never worked for 2000 AD properly. I think he thought that he didn't want to. It was a weird thing. Anyway, with Lawless sort of is a brand new strip, but it came out of a series called Insurrection that I was doing with Colin McNeil. And Colin came to the end of that, and we finished it. And I could see ways of carrying certain bits of it on, but Colin wanted to move on to something else because he was basically sick of drawing judges, which was fair. And
he should have done such a great job on America, then, should he?
Exactly. And I had to be chatting to Phil at the time, and I said, "You don't fancy drawing this strip?" And he went, "Well, 2000 AD wouldn't have me." And I went, "What makes you think that?" I think they'd bite your hand off. So I introduced him to, and it was like 2000 AD. Went, "Of course we want you." And it was one of those moments where there had been a long-standing misunderstanding.
Right.
And we started working on this together, and it is. For both of us, it's Phil saying it. I mean, because I work on slightly more strips, I have a lot of favourites, but it's absolutely one of the favourite things I've ever worked on. And Phil's saying the same thing too. And he's now done more of that than he has of anything else his entire career.
Over 400 pages, something like that. Yeah. It's nuts, isn't it?
And it is brilliant.
Detailed
I'm running out of superlatives every time he sends me these pages. Seriously,
Just smash adjectives together and make new words for it, Dan.
They come in and I look at it and I go, "That's amazing. Can't get any better than that." And then the following month he delivers something else. And I go, "All right, just give it up now." It's just So that's part of it. Anyway, these great long-standing relationships with certain people, and there are other people that I go to, but conversely, you can go to. Say at Marvel or DC, quite often you will be assigned an artist, and that's great because you get to work with some lovely people. But quite often you can make suggestions, but the editor's usually got somebody in mind that they want to use, and it's a matter then of learning their strengths and weaknesses, so you can write the most effectively as you can for them. And very seldom does that not work. There's only been a couple of times where I've gone, "I really wish I hadn't had that artist." You find what you need to do, but sometimes it's been great, and it's again then led to other long-standing relationships with the Dynamite stuff, the stuff we're talking about allegedly this evening.
Good call back on that one, Dan. What you did there.
I was going to bring you back, but you did it yourself.
One fake cabinet, that's what they call me. They with the Red Sonja book. So that Nate said, "I want Jonathan Lau to do it because he's incredibly good, he's incredibly fast, and he's already drawing this character, and it'll be great." And he wanted to do some superheroes, so this is a great opportunity. And no complaints from me. In fact, now I've seen what he's doing, I'm going, "Oh my God, that's amazing." But on the Vampirella book, Nate hadn't made a decision. He had a couple of people in mind. And I had quite coincidentally just started chatting regularly to Paul during lockdown. That he and I had sort of started having Skype chats and stuff like that. And we were sort of working on some stuff that may see the light of day quite soon. Anyway, just because it was a fun thing to work on, developing a project that's about to come out. And because obviously work was dying all over the place, things were drying up all over the place. And I said to him, "You don't fancy writing Vampirella and some superheroes, do you? Drawing that, do you?" And Paul went, "Yeah, that sounds fun." So I connected him to Nate, and Nate went, "Yes, please." So that's why we've got Paul on there, because I actually made the suggestion. Which he probably curses me for now. I don't know. So sometimes you can. Sometimes you can suggest an artist and or a creative like a colorist or something like that. And sometimes you can. Certainly, when you're pitching to companies, it's always a really good idea if you're sort of going in mob-handed. So rather than me going to I don't know, Image or DC or Dark Horse and saying, "I've got an idea for a comic." If I go to them saying, "I've got an idea for a comic and it's me and this artist I think will be right for it, and he's done some samples or she's done some samples of this character. What do you think?" The whole package that is a sort of a better way of knocking on a door, to sort of go in and say, this is how we plan to do it, and that
definitely helps them visualize. Then I think anybody, editors or whoever you're pitching anything to, if they've got visuals, it's so much easier, isn't it, to sort of get an idea of what it is that you.
No one reads the words anyway.
Look at the pretty pictures.
Exactly. I mean, Lawless being a case in point there. Quite clearly, the only reason to look at that is that Phil Winslowe's artwork is so gorgeous. Apparently, there's a story.
Those beach bubbles get in the way.
They get taken off.
The amount of artwork that must be missing.
It's a crime, to be honest.
Especially with Phil, actually, because Phil puts a lot into every little detail. So you can guarantee if there's a speech bubble, it's covered covering something up.
I tell you what I liked about the artwork on Vampirella, The Dark Powers. Paul's artwork reminded me a little bit of Bart Sears' artwork on Justice League of Europe. So I was immediately drawn in, as that generation of reader, into the plausibility of this book. And in some ways, it has got that dynamics. I wouldn't say Vampirella is the Guy Gardner of the group, but she's quite acerbic. Yeah. And it does work well against the more hokiness of some of the older characters. It's a great dynamic sort of relationship you set up in the first bit of the book before you bring, and I mean all the action, into the second part of the book as well.
The action sequences are lovely as well.
I wanted to establish the credibility of her as a very dynamic character, albeit not a superhero. So we do have what might be regarded as sort of extensively violent pre-credit sequence of just her in action, thinking, "Oh my gosh, she's so cool, tearing people apart, doing all this kind of stuff," which then I won't say backfires on her, but then leads to a consequence of that. And it's if it had been another character in another circumstance, I probably wouldn't have let it run that long. But I thought Paul's artwork is so graphic and it's so dynamic. Let's do that.
It's really such a great contrast, that sort of high-tech look with, of course, the group's aesthetics as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, the group's aesthetic, which, as you say, is sort of hokey in places.
Yeah.
And as the series go on, there are going to be moments where I almost I attempt anyway to take some of the hokiest looking characters and actually actually give them a moment where you go, "Oh, actually, he's really cool. That's why he's a superhero." But even so, a guy in a tricorn hat and a cape, he looks like a twat. I mean, he just doesn't. There's no escaping it.
Yeah, gunpowder being the high tech on his world. Forget about it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. In fact, there's indeed a line about that where somebody he refers to something as being quite high tech, and they go, "Come on, mate. On your world, flintlocks are high tech."
And we know which character's saying that, don't we?
Yeah. I have to say as well, she looks pretty mean the way Paul draws her. She's got this real edge to her. She's not just, because a lot of artists, they make her look very beautiful, very elegant. Whereas in this, she looks like she can seriously kick some ass.
Yeah, she's more Sigourney Weaver and Sarah Connor, isn't she?
That was a deliberate effort to try and make this idea that she's dangerous because she's dangerous rather than dangerous because she's seductive. I mean, she is seductive, but they have that edge to her. So that she is like having an animal, almost like an animal around. They're not quite sure it's tamed. Is it going to follow orders? And so they all treat her with a sort of respect. But she's really clever. I tried to write her as being a really quite clever character. And so she's got a sense of humour. And she says things, but she says things so deadpan that half the time they don't realise they're jokes. And she has to say that was a joke. You realise that was a joke. And I quite like that idea that she's like very sardonic. And she's
it's letting us in, isn't it? As the readers, we've got that sort of dramatic irony, haven't we? Where we know what's going on, even though they don't.
Yeah. Yes, I'd almost, if I could, have her doing an eye roll to camera, but I can't because But it is almost that. So
that's really hard in comics, actually, to do that, isn't it?
Yeah,
you've got to get the expression just right, and you've got to time it right.
You've got to time it right, and it's not appropriate in everything. I think, but there are some moments where that moment is delicious. But Paul's done amazing work, and I mean, I knew he would. He and I have. We've essentially been working in parallel for years and years and years because, I mean, he is something of a veteran of the British comic scene.
Yeah, he's been around a while, hasn't he?
Yeah, he did some early stuff for the Warhammer comic back in the 90s when I was starting out.
We'll never know what early stuff that's me, isn't it? Oh, here we go.
So the two of us have sort of been working in sort of shouting distance of each other for a very long time. And it was probably 2 years ago or year before last, I can't remember. It seems so long ago now because the world's ended. But anyway, comparatively recently, Marvel asked me to do a Silver Surfer one-shot for one of their events.
Yeah,
and I said yes, that's lovely. And it was Marvel who put Paul on it as artist. And Paul did the most amazing job. I think it was the end of 18. I think it came out, but it was great. It was really good fun. It was a one-shot story. Paul drew it. the work was amazing because he's great at that kind of cosmic stuff.
Yes.
And so I got in touch with him, and I suddenly realized I at that point thought, oh, Paul Davidson, he's American, isn't he? And I suddenly went, no, he's not. And it turns out, obviously, he's not. And I hadn't realized that. And I said, oh, let's get on the phone and have a chat. And we ended up on Skype. And it was like, this is ridiculous. We've both been working in parallel for like 20 plus years. This is the first time we've actually worked together. And we're both in the UK. So it's even more ridiculous. So from that, we started chatting on a regular basis. And so I can't talk about it yet. But he showed me a project he'd been working on where he basically wanted a writer to come in and help him handle the heavy lifting on the world building, and the art is stunning. And of course I went yes, particularly with lockdown. And it was like let's create things because we're in lockdown and we need things.
That's
to
fun
do.
as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
creating something new from scratch. Yeah.
So we have been working on that behind the scenes, and obviously that means that in the meantime, both of us need paying gigs to keep the wolf from the door, or eventually we're going to have to let it out. And that's where the Vampirella thing came along, and I went, oh, this is a fun. I'm enjoying this, Paul. I think you're going to really enjoy drawing this as well. And so I think he was a great choice because it's that right balance between comic book and realistically crunchy and violent.
Yeah,
with a great graphic feel to it. It's also, and I mean this as a positive thing, it's also got a slightly retro feel and a very British feel to it. If that artwork was in, I don't know, Deadline or 2000 AD, it would not look out of place. And I think that's good. It's almost like it's almost got a sort of punk aesthetic, which is rare.
There's a lot of people are into that at the moment. There's a sort of a resurgence of that sort of style of comic. I've noticed a lot of new comics I don't know where it's come from, why it's become interesting again, and why people want it. But it's definitely on the edge, as it were, of what's new, and it's really. I think it is. I've got no complaints.
No, me neither. To me, it's a delicious hit of sort of nostalgia. I think it's a cyclic thing. I think for the very simple fact that comics haven't been very much like that for a few years.
Yeah,
I think there's probably now a generation of talent that's hitting, a readership generation that's hitting.
Yeah.
But actually recalls it from an earlier formative time and going, why aren't comics like that anymore? And suddenly they are again. It's like music, I suppose. But you know what I mean? It's like. It's drawing back on those roots.
And of course, to the new readers, to the younger readers, it's all new again.
It's all completely new,
Like you say with music, like that's why everything sounded like the 80s for a while, because it was new again. I got no complaints about that either, because I love music from the 80s.
No, absolutely that. You see those cycles. I think it's probably more obvious in comics than we think it is, because we're to them all the time. We don't necessarily see the sort of I don't know, flares coming in and out of start fashion, but it is like those seasonal changes in the fashion industry. You go suddenly, the artists. There are some artists who, once they come along, they're fully established because they are great and they are timeless and they will always be immortal. But there are others that they're sort of just in the sort of general everyday working of things. Styles come and go, and it's like everybody wants to do it like this now. Everybody wants artists who can do this now, and then that goes out of fashion. The next thing comes in. I think. It's weird because I think most people can kind of place a comic if they're shown a comic at random, page of comic art at random. Most regular comic readers can place it on the basis of who the talent is and what they're drawing. They go, well, that's got to be mid-90s.
Yeah, you can sort of get it within 5 years usually.
You can get it within 5 years. But I think that actually if you didn't go from the regular cues of who the talent is or what inker they were working with at the time or what character they were working on, I think you can get it just by the style. Then you can go, that's got to be early noughties. That's got to be mid 80s. That's got, do you know what I mean? Just the way that, even down to the panel by panel storytelling. There's a certain thing you go, you not see decompression like that in anything before 78. So
definitely. Here's Ollie's back. We lost you for Ollie for a while.
It's the same problem you had, Dan, earlier. I find that because I'm working off a Macs don't like the Chrome browser. So every time, it should be a running joke at this point, Shane, every time the conversation gets going, I drop out. I have to restart the whole thing again. But I did forewarn Shane this week that it was going to happen.
Yeah, so we're not going to be sponsored by Apple, Chrome. So don't worry about that. I've got some more comments here. Is that Zalax Sevaration? I think I'm not. How do you say that?
I think you've done that quite well.
Oh, sorry, Zalax. It's really hard.
I think it is. But Zalax. Yes, if Zalax is who Zalax is the Zalax I think it is. I know exactly who that is.
Oh, you know it is.
Yeah.
He's asking a question, I think.
Would reading the Vampirella comics be necessary before reading the Red Sonja ones, she asks.
Good question.
No. No, they would not. I've tried to make them completely self-contained stories so that you understand what's going on in the context of each comic, because I hate that where you're going, oh, you are now obliged to buy every single thing in this event in order to understand it. So if you just want to read the Red Sonja, that's great. You will get a pretty full picture. I do think they complement each other. I do think there is a nice connectivity, and that there are sort of certain things that you'll see in one thing and then you'll see it pay off in another, and vice versa. But no, it's not like Red Sonja will be completely inexplicable to you. And ironically, Red Sonja sort of weirdly starts more at the beginning of a story than Vampirella does, although Vampirella's come out first. Vampirella, it's like cold open, was right there, and you've got to go, what's going on? And we explain what's going on. Whereas Red Sonja's story starts very much like the beginning of a classic Red Sonja story, where, sort of, once upon a time in Hyboria, she's riding down the street and this is happening. You know what I mean? So it's much more conventional. Because again, I wanted to fuck around with conventions. I wanted to go, you think this is a Red Sonja story, don't you? It's not. I mean, you've got to get quite a long way into it before you realise it's not going to do the conventional things the Red Sonja thing is going to do. But yeah, so Red Sonja is completely readable in its own right. And don't tell Paul that, because Paul will be offended you don't want to read Vampirella.
And don't tell Dynamite you said that, because they want to sell them all.
Absolutely. No.
Okay, I think clarification there is when he's saying that was me, he was talking about the cement comment, because he said,
was it?
It was a compliment for sure.
Thank you very much.
Another question from Zalax. Any chance of getting more Kingdom or Fiefdom stories?
Yeah. Kingdom's the strip I do in I have done for a long time in 2000 AD with Richard Elson about the genetic engineered dog soldiers who are literally dogs. And yet the answer to that is yes. Fiefdom was the spin-off novel that we did a prose novel that span off from it. But we did it. Started. God, it's got to be 10 or more years since we started it. And we did it sort of a fun thing to do, and it turned into one of the fixtures of 2008. It became very, very popular, and we haven't stopped doing it because we love it and there's more stories to tell. But we have rested it for a while. We've done about 7 series of it, and we've rested it because I just think we need a breather. Richard's been drawing. We only do it when Richard's available to draw it. He's the only person who's drawn it. Yeah. So it was a matter of, well, let's leave it be until he's ready to do it. So to completely clear our heads, I said to him, let's do something else instead. Let's just do a different strip for 2000 AD. What do you want to draw? And he gave me some ingredients of the sort of things that he wanted to draw. And so we now have a second series that is, I think the first series of it, is just finished in 2000 AD, but we're coming back very soon with the second one because it's proved to be very popular. A series called Feral and Foe. Which again, it's the two of us like on Kingdom, but this is a actually proper good high fantasy sword and sorcery about what happens to some of the kind of villains in a Lord of the Rings style epics. Not literally the orcs and goblins, but imagine that the guys on Sauron's side. What happens to them when the Lord of the Rings finishes? That is to say, what happens to them when the good guys win? The big bad's dead. What happens to the guys left over? We're going,
because there's plenty of other endings on that one film.
Yeah. So this is a story about, because these are creatures, as the title suggests, these are creatures judged feral and foe, and they're being hunted down like Nazi war criminals after the end of a Lord of the Rings type war. And it's about 2 of them, and it's like, what do they do and how do they survive? And and I have to say, it's really quite funny, but it's also quite serious. And Richard's art on it is gorgeous.
Yes.
And I've tried to structure it so that it hasn't got, although it's quite clear what fantasy tropes we're referencing, like wizards and orcs and zombies and stuff like that. None of them are called that. So I don't call anything, but we've invented new terminology. So this is our own invented world. So it works that way. And Richard's loving it. And I think it's a kind of breath of fresh air for both of us. The readers like it. So I think we'll do a bit more of that. and then we'll go back to Kingdom, and then we'll probably alternate between the two so that we don't get stale on either one of them. But
yeah, I have to say, Dan, you do give great full answers to the questions.
Yeah.
Is that your way of saying that there were 10 pages of questions and we got through 3 questions so far?
It's always the way. We did a podcast, didn't we, a few weeks ago? And I had a list of things to talk about, and I think we got through about 10% of them.
Yeah.
But it was great. It was a great chat, you know.
You're saying I talk too much. Is that what you're saying?
No. You see, you get the other end of the scale where you get a guest. So you ask them a question, and they'll go, "Yeah." We got to go an hour. Well done. I'd much rather someone who just talks and talks than someone who just
there you go.
Single word answers when me and Ollie are having to just talk for an hour, basically.
Clearly, though, it's a reputation that precedes me, because you said when Paul had to contact you and say that he potentially couldn't make it tonight, and if he did, he was going to be late. But he said, not to worry, Dan will do all the talking anyway. So I don't know. I should be offended. I might have to go off in a half.
I think he thought maybe he wouldn't get a word in, so he thought, I'm not going to turn up. We'll have to get him on his own or something.
Yeah. Oh, then you'll get it.
The quiet one.
Did you enjoy Vampirella, Paul? Yes.
Yeah. It was all right. What are you doing now, Paul? Something else. Can't tell you. Oh, we've got another question from DB. Is there any chance of more Deadwardians? That was with Ian, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was with Ian. That was the first time I worked with Ian Kalbard. Well, potentially is the answer to that. I'd love to. Deadwardians was the only time I worked with the now defunct Vertigo, and I just one day I had this idea for a strip, and I just pitched it to Vertigo because I thought I bet Vertigo would like this. And they said they literally half an hour after I sent the email, they said, yes, we'll have it. And it was an 8-issue series. And I'd never worked with Ian before, but I contacted him and I said, I think you'd be perfect for this. So it was one of those ones where I went in the door with an artist. And from that, working on that and having so much fun together working on that, we then went on to do Wild's End for Boom and obviously Brink for 2000 AD. Yeah. So it was Vertigo title. So it's technically the rights were retained by Warner Brothers. And we kept saying we'd love to do a sequel, and they went, "Oh, we don't know whether it's sold well enough to do a sequel." Blah blah blah. And they were sort of sad. But when they went through all their, this was a while ago, so when they went through all their wranglings and moved and to our surprise, I asked, and to my delight, DC Legal said, "Yes, you can have the rights back."
Brilliant!
So the rights are actually now with me and Ian. We actually own the rights to this to do what we want with. So if there are any publishers out there who'd like to reprint the original series and see a second series, then we would be delighted to do that. But I do have to say that certain interest has been taken in the property as the IP as a potential for television or movies, which would be fantastic.
I think it would actually be a great TV series.
I think it would be a great sort of Netflix style sort of series.
Yeah.
So yes, you may see some more Deadwardians at some point. It might not be another comic, but it might well be something. But it could be another comic. I mean, I'd love it if somebody picked it up because it was a complete story, which I was very pleased. We got to tell a complete story, but it was a complete story that could have been the first of several because it's got a basis for other things.
Brilliant. Well, publishers out there, call them up. Let's make it happen because I think that would be really cool. Now, I do believe what our sort of tech guy, Mr. Sam Morgan, has a question for you. So I'm going to let him out of his cupboard.
Yeah, desperate all night.
Temporarily to ask a question.
Oh, I'm out. Oh, that's better. Now I can breathe. I've been holding my breath the entire time.
Yeah, you've got 2 minutes before we put you back in there. You nerd.
No, I just wanted to ask Dan. I'm a massive fan of Brink. I love it.
Thank you.
And I want to know, first off, what's the Mercury event? Are we going to find out about the Mercury event? Because you teased that 5 years ago and then nothing. It's so frustrating.
That's a good question for you.
I hear there's going to be an audio drama.
Yes. To explain that, the answer I'm about to give to people who don't know what Brink is. Brink is the series that Ian Kalbard and I went on to create for 2000 AD. We both worked for 2000 AD, but not together. And having established a working relationship, said, what can we create for there? So we came up with the idea for Brink. Brink is a police procedural set on a space station habitat in the comparatively near future. We pitched it as our elevator pitch for it is True Detective meets Outland. That was the pitch for it. And we gave it to 2000 AD, and we said, and I thought that Matt Tharg would probably like it, but probably turn it down because it was a very slow burn. It wasn't a classic 2000 AD series at all. It runs for a long time. Each series, we're now working on the 5th series, runs for an unusual number of episodes, and it is very talky. And then sort of nothing happens for, it's conversation after conversation. And when something does happen, it's like ridiculously, brutally violent and over very, very quickly. So it's all about mood and atmosphere and character. And I thought they're not going to go for this. And to my surprise, they did. And then once they did, and we started working on it, I thought, well, the readers are not going to like this strip because it's so not 2000 AD. Even though it's a decent strip, they're not going to like it. But it has been, I think, voted the most popular strip in 2000 AD 2 years running now.
Wow.
And Matt keeps recommissioning it. And yes, it is one of those things that clearly is in some shape or form going to move into other medium. And the audio is a likely place for that, at least to start. I think it would lend itself to that. But the Mercury, yes, these things will be addressed. The Mercury event is something that happens during the first book where basically Mercury, the planet Mercury, disappears. And then coming back to that, the people start going, the premise of Brink is that the Earth has died and is no longer capable of supporting life. So the whole human race has essentially emigrated to artificial habitats and space stations and are living on what's called the brink, i.e. the brink of existence. Everything's claustrophobic. It's incredibly claustrophobic. Everything's recycled. And in this situation, that our lead characters are basically police. They're called habitat security. They're police officers who are investigating a crime on one of these overcrowded habitats. And the crime has got ritualistic, weird overtones, and it starts to get a bit creepy. And all the way through, we're trying to walk a very thin line between, is there anything actually supernatural happening here? Or is it just the fact that everyone's slowly going mad because of the conditions at the end of the world and they're living in this horrible circumstance? And
I do love that theme, that sort of Lovecraftian. Are they mad, or is there something really
the ambiguity of it?
Every single time I get close to sort of revealing that there is, I do something else that pulls back and suggests, no, they're just bonkers. So the answer is yes, we have a grand plan, and big answers will be given. They'll be given in a sort of ultimately a Lovecraftian way, which is like, here is a statement, make of it what you will. But we're trying to do some quite clever things. So, and it's also evolving as we go along. So when we first created it, obviously Bridget, the main female character.
Yeah. I loved your Game of Thrones style twist in the first series.
Yes, let's not give that away, but yes, there is that.
Nope.
But Bridget, the main female character, we thought would be important for a while and probably would have a recurring role. But there was something about her. So by the time we got through the first book, we just went, wait a minute, she's sort of become our Ripley, really. And so we adjusted so each book has got a different theme and a different so there's one I kid you not that is sort of upstairs, downstairs in space. It's Downton Abbey in space. It's about very rich and very poor people living in this habitat community where some people are sort of below stairs and serving the people above. And there's all sorts of things like that. But she is the constant through it, and we're playing with that. And she, considering she doesn't say very much and she is not an expressive person, she's just developed this personality which means that she's almost irresistible to us as creators. That she's kind of got this kind of inner strength that is really, really great. But we're working at the moment on book 5, which will appear next year in 2000 AD. And book 5, slightly in a good way, fucks around with the format of what we've done so far, in as much as we actually vary our viewpoint and we show something from a different angle for effect. I'm say no more than that because I don't want to spoil it. But each series we've done so far has got its own title, Skeleton Life and so on. And book 5, which will come out next year, is actually called Mercury Retrograde, So Mercury retrograde seems to
some
suggest
answers.
that we will get some answers,
Well,
or at least more information towards those answers.
Teasers.
Yeah,
brilliant. No, keep doing it. Brink's amazing. Love it.
Thank you. Again, that I would say, Ollie was saying earlier about how much he loved Lawless, and I was saying Lawless is just one of. I love doing what I do, and I love writing the strips that I write. All of them have things about them that please me. They are pleasures to create. But Lawless is a very particular treat, and if there was anything that came close to the enjoyment of doing Lawless every month, it's doing Brink every week for 2000 AD. Those two strips are just lovely. Everything about them. They are so satisfying. I almost save them up as treats. At the end of the week, it's I go, what's left to do? Oh, Brink, great. And it's just there's something about it because they are just, I don't know. I think when you've got something that's sort of working and it's going to an artist who's going to make it really work beautifully and deliver superbly. So it's thank you for the positive comments on those. Thank you.
I'm going back in my box now.
Cheers, Sam. He's very well behaved, isn't he?
He is, yeah.
He's house trained and everything. So I was picking up on what you were saying before, Dan. You were saying that there are some characters, and this one character in particular from Brink was she turned into a character that you didn't expect. That she had this quiet, stoic sort of sense of power to her. My words, not yours, but that's what I was getting from what you were saying. Yeah. Almost as if it hadn't come from you, like it had come from the character. And that I find that really interesting. Do characters do that sometimes when they go from the writer to the artist, and then something in between the two creators creates something almost with a light of its own? Yeah,
they definitely do in comics. That you create a character in a comic, but you only really find out what that character is going to be like when you can see what they look like when they've been drawn. That's a very important dynamic. Yeah. Not just how they've been drawn, but actually how they act. It's the acting, the way that their behavior and expression is portrayed by the artist. So what we call acting in the comics is really, really important, because sometimes that can completely alter the way dialogue works. That's why I like to read dialogue when something comes in. If you write a script and think, oh, that's a brilliant line I gave to that character there, and then you see it on the page, you're going, oh God, no, that expression is completely wrong for that line. It makes that line sarcastic. I don't want that to be sarcastic. So you change the line in order to make, whatever. Right. So that does happen in comics all the time. When I'm writing prose, when I'm writing novels, quite often, even without an artist to lens the character through, I'll start writing a character and think, oh, I know who this character is. I sort of, but after you've written it for some length of time, you suddenly go, it's become something I wasn't expecting. It's kind of evolved in the writing. And that does also happen with comic book characters. It's so Bridget, for instance, definitely evolved because of the way Ian drew her, and then, but also evolved because of the way I wrote her and he drew her consistently over a period of multiple episodes. It wasn't like, oh, now I know what she looks like, she's changed in my head. Once we'd done 5, 10, 20 episodes of her, it's like, oh my God, she is resolute and stoic all the time. Because we've, so when there have been moments like the fourth book, the one that was most recently published, she essentially goes home. She goes back to the habitat she grew up on. And there's a lot of touching base with her family. So we get to see essentially a little bit of her origin story. And we also get to see some much more personal, emotional moments with her than we've ever seen at any point in the previous 3 books. It's not a lot. And it's not like she's weeping and, but there's a real emotional content to it. And that to me was almost shocking to write it, because we'd never seen her reveal that much about herself. And also, I think it only had power as a story because readers have seen her be stoic for 3 episodes, 3 series. And when you get there and she suddenly goes to visit her elderly mum, and you
means more.
It means more. You realise her dad died in the line of duty, and he was a cop, and she's followed in his footsteps, and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, oh wow! So the episode in book 4 where she goes home to see her mother for the first time in 20 years. Is almost dialogueless because her mum is old. She has dementia. She's living alone in this tiny habitat flat that is no bigger than a back bedroom because nobody's got there's no real estate. Everyone is crammed into this crossroads. So she's living in this thing. The neighbor looks after her, and she's got VR glasses. So she watches the news all the time. And when Bridget comes into the flat, the old lady just hears somebody and goes, "Is that you?" And she calls out the name of her dead husband, thinking it's him home from work. Yeah. And she goes, yeah, it is. And she hasn't seen her mum, and she doesn't make a big fuss about it. But you just see her walk around this tiny apartment looking at the pictures and the old books and stuff like that. and there's virtually no dialogue, and it's like that. I think is an enormously powerful moment for her character. But like I said, it wouldn't be if that's one of the first things we'd ever seen her do. It was only powerful because it came after 3 big stories.
And it's lovely having that opportunity, isn't it, with a character that you've invested so much in, to finally sort of let a little bit of their emotion out, even if it's in a subtle way, to get that payoff, you know.
And to see, it's also to find out where characters go after all, because that's to me that's one of the great things about sequential fiction, particularly in comics, when you get to write a comic for a while. You know, a decent run on a comic, and you really start to get under the skin of a character and see what things they're likely to do, and you can then think of. I think then you start thinking of better stories, because you kind of go, well, I know what they were like during that. What happens if I do this to them instead, and where's that going to go? And that's certainly true of the pro stuff. I mean, I made a joke of it just now, but I've written a lot of novels for Warhammer, and with Gaunt's Ghost, I've been doing that for 20 years. I've written 15 novels. In fact, in the Sabbath World stories, which I write, which they are part of, I think there's approaching 25 books worth of material for that. There are characters there I've been writing for 20 years, and it's amazing to me how they are still the same characters that I invented when I started writing, but they've also they've not just evolved in terms of the things that's happened to them, but they've evolved as characters. I now know them in greater detail, and so and it sounds like incredibly pretentious, but I sort of they sort of determine what they are going to do. That is to say, when I'm writing a story and something happens, I now know that character is likely to respond like that. That character is likely to respond like that. And there have been moments where there's been particularly one notorious event, which I won't repeat because I've told the story so many times, but I was rewriting a novel under great pressure, and one character just appeared out of nowhere. I didn't create them, and they just and I've heard writers talk about this idea that you know when it's going well when the characters start talking to you, and I've gone that's fine,
get lost.
You're skeptical about that, aren't you?
Yeah,
it
sounds like such a pretentious writery thing to say. So I know it's going well when the characters start to talk to me, darling. Because that is, I'm afraid, it's just a few short steps away from you saying something like, I see myself more of a dream weaver or storyteller. You go, fuck off. But in this particular instance, I don't know, I wouldn't quite describe it that way, but there are moments where I have essentially had very little control over a character, and it's been slightly freaky. It's like almost like a seance. So this particular character, I was having to rewrite a novel that I'd lost so rapidly that when I was rewriting it, this character turned up in the middle of it that I hadn't consciously invented. And I sort of was writing, and I was going, "Where the f have you come from? Get out of here!" But I was on such a tight deadline. I didn't really want to waste time going back and sort of writing this character out. I thought, all right, you're not doing any harm where you are. You stay there. But this character would not go away. But I didn't go. I planned to put this character in the book. This character was just there, name and all. And having written the book, the character was so memorable. They went on to become the main villain for the next 3 novels.
Wow!
And that character
is so weird.
It's an incredibly popular character that people come up to conventions and say, I love that character. I love to hate him. He was such a brilliant villain.
Wow.
And I'm going, well, clearly I invented him because there was no one else in the room at the time when he first appeared. But I did not go, I've got a great idea for a villain and write it all down and plan it. He just happened. And what he did, he just did in the story. So I have slightly more sympathy for those kind of wonderful Stephen King-esque stories about, the story took over and I had no control over it. It's like, well, that does happen. And that's, in a weird little way, that's the same with characters like Bridget in Brink, where she started off really as a character, an audience viewpoint character. She was just there to be the lead character. She was the protagonist. She was our Inspector Barnaby in Midsummer Murders. She doesn't have to have much of a personality. She's just the detective we're following into the case. By the time we got to the end of the case, it's like, no, it's about her. It is about her, and it's about what an amazingly resourceful, quiet, centered, what's her dark secret and everything like that. And that's where it moved on to. And of course, I wouldn't have planned that. It just happened.
The best, detective stories I always find are the ones that start off as just like
with a murder.
There's a murder. Well, but there's a sleuth, and they're pretty 2-dimensional at the start, and then as the case unravels, so does the sleuth. you know,
yes.
and you find out all their foibles. As the case unravels, so does their personality, you know. I love those stories, you know.
Yes,
and
I think that's why when we pitched Brink, we could describe it as True Detective meets Outland, because we loved the fact that True Detective did exactly that. First series of True Detective did that, because it had a supernatural element without ever really committing as to whether it was true or not, but it just made your skin crawl all the way through. But also it unraveled the characters as it went along.
Yeah.
So that's all we meant by that. We said, okay, let's try and create that sort of balancing act. What we didn't expect to do, that we would actually have the unraveling happen as well, because we weren't doing it in True Detective jumps around in its timescales, and that's how it managed to unpeel its banana skins or its onion skins of meaning. Whereas Brink is entirely linear. It's entirely linear and always will be. It never goes back and forth. So I thought what we're trying to sort of, as it were, borrow from True Detective is the sense of uneasiness that, is there something demonic happening here, or is it, are we just our imagination's getting a bit active because it's dark, you know? Just that kind of sense of suspense. But weirdly, one of the things that happened alchemically, just because of the creation of it, was that we got the peeling back of the characters anyway, and that by the end they became much more than just the ciphers who were driving the story. And that to me is exciting, because you can't. Well, you can plan that, but we didn't plan that. And when you don't plan something and something really cool happens by just some sort of osmosis, that is a really interesting thing that you get out of. And I think that's why I'm such a fan of. It's probably why I'm such a fan of talking so much, by the way. And that's only half a joke, but I like talking, because I've had no difficulty filling up the time today by shouting at you. But I also write long forms. I write novel sequences that are 15 novels long. I write series for 2000 AD that run for 5, 6, 7 books. I write, you know, runs of Aquaman that lasts 50 issues or whatever like that. I like writing long form. That's my favorite thing. And I think it borrows from the fact that sort of storyline fascinates me, because the longer you can successfully sustain a storyline, actually, rather than running out of ideas, the more ideas that it allows you to play with. Because you've got more and more of a baseline with which to play things. So I always said, for instance, with Gaunt's Ghosts, that I would stop writing them when I ran out of ideas, not because it had to, you know, and I think that's true. So, for instance, although I don't watch many of them anymore, I am an enormous fan intellectually and a huge supporter of soap operas. I think soap operas are a really, really underrated art form. Coronation Street, which celebrates 60 years, this, you know, EastEnders, even the Aussie soap operas.
Of characters, you know.
It's more than that. I do a whole project on this with my media study students. There's so much. And it's the whole fact that you come home from work, you plug into someone else's life problems, and there's a solution, whether rightly or wrongly. A fictitious narrative gives you a solution. So you can switch off, whether it's for half an hour with EastEnders or Coronation. I'm a big supporter of soap operas as well, and this goes back to my days at university, where you know, you had all of these people who failed to get into Oxbridge but got into Leeds with me, and they were like, "Oh, we don't watch." This was the Neighbours explosion, where me and my mates would meet up at lunchtime to watch Neighbours in the canteen at university, and still go watch it at home. But I think you're right, Dan. I think there's a big power in soap operas, and there's got to be more than one reason why it's still the most popular TV form.
Absolutely, I think they are fundamentally under. I mean, you know, you mentioned Neighbours. I used to enjoy watching Neighbours. I used to watch Home and Away. Actually, I loved Home and Away. I used to love regular listening to The Archers on the radio. And I think one of the operational things there, quite often there's a surprisingly high quality of acting in these things, particularly Corrie and EastEnders. The individual storylines are fascinating, and it is that repetition of re-entering someone's life on a regular basis. But when you sit down on a Thursday night, say, and you watch the latest episode of EastEnders, and you're really engaged in whatever Phil's doing at the moment or whatever it is, but part of the reason it's not just how good that storyline is. It's the fact that in the back of your mind is all the other storylines that you've kind of got a sense of his life. So that it's this big event that's happening near whatever it happens to be, but as part of a greater context of a depth of character, and that's what I'm talking about with Brink, and that's what I'm talking about with a long-running series of novels. It's not just coming up with a good character in a good situation and a good story. It's like the sense of a progression, the sense of a life lived, and that actually has even greater meaning.
That history informs every new story, doesn't it?
Exactly. And that's why I think people hate it when the big comic companies try and reboot continuity. Because
exactly the same.
It's exactly that. It's the richness of the background that they want to go, okay, what are you going to fit to it this time? And how is it going to have back ripples down through that?
Yeah.
And people going, oh, we need to simplify it to introduce new readers. And I'm going, well, I started reading comics in about 1976, 1977. Most of the Marvel comics I started reading were already in the hundreds at least by then. I mean, I started reading X-Men and loving it at the beginning of the Claremont Byrne run. I started reading Daredevil just about when Frank Miller took over.
What a great time.
What a great time. What a time to be alive. But the point is, I didn't go into my WX Smith and pick that up and go, X-Men 109. Well, I'm not reading that because I haven't read the other 108 issues. I didn't pick up Daredevil and go, oh, there've been whatever it was, 60, 160, whatever issues.
Doesn't put you off, does it?
It doesn't. I just and I read those issues, those first issues, and I also didn't understand it all. I was going, I don't know who that is.
That's
I'm
part of the fun.
What's going on here. But I was going, I'll be back next month because next month I'll get more of the answers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And after about 3 issues, I was going, I know all this and this is brilliant, and I loved it. And I don't know why that is a problem these days. I mean, I'm all for tradition.
I think it is, I think they make a mistake, a lot of time, Marvel and DC, two more companies that obviously won't sponsor us now. But I think they're making a mistake when they do all the old, the reboots and things like that, because you're taking away that thing that makes the long form story attractive. That history. Like yourself, I remember the first time I read a comic that was like that was probably like I don't know, an Avengers comic or something like that, and it was like in the early hundreds. And I didn't know what was going on. I had no idea what was going on, who any of these characters were. So I wanted to know. Yeah. So I wanted to. Not only did I want to carry on reading it to find out what was happening next, I wanted to go back and get the back issues to find out what were they talking about. What what were they? When they put the asterisk in the C issue.
But I did that, and I as a writer, generally speaking, there are a few occasions where I don't do this, but as a writer, in comics, I tend to be very old school, which is I believe that every issue or episode of anything I write may be the first thing, some reader's first experience. So I do a lot of traditional old school things in my scripting, which is I try and make sure there's some rudimentary form of recap, or that there is some opportunity for characters to name each other in a scene, so that you don't read the whole thing and go, nobody called anybody by name, so I don't know who these people are. What I really object to in this day and age, and this is to me one of the biggest serious crimes, is the comics, and some of them are brilliant comics, don't get me wrong, but the comics that are published monthly in America that are simply the next 20 pages of the trade. There is just simply the next 20 pages that happen. There is no beginning, middle, and end. There's no intro. There's no outro. It's just like it's just like starts, and when you collect it together, it's the most amazing read, and it's beautiful.
It works. It works in that format.
As a monthly comic, it's like oh my god, that's not how you put out a monthly book, and the monthly book is the first thing it is before it's any of the other things. And so I've always done that. But even so, the fact that I make quite old-fashioned allowances to try and ease readers in, at the same time I'm going, how much hand-holding do you need? Comics are fun. If you don't understand it immediately, read some more, because that's how I got into it.
I like the good trick you did, and I'm doing this for the third time now, bringing it back. I like the trick you did. It's just a splash page in the Vampirella comic where you just tag each of the characters. And I know Brian Michael Bendis is doing this with Legion of Superheroes at the moment, because, of course, in his, a lot of them are radically redesigned. So it helps to have this sort of like narrative sort of effect where they've all got this, oh, well, you can see our names because we're in the 31st century. Yeah. It's a great little tell. And like you say, it helps people without destroying any of the story, jump in. And Brian Michael Bendis tends to have a recap in each one of his issues anyway. It's a good time to be into comics.
Yeah, some do and some don't. But I think loads of different writers have different ways of sort of easing a reader into an issue. But there are some that don't, and I just think it is something that needs to happen. And again, I think the tagging in Legion of Superheroes is particularly effective. It's explained by the technology. Similarly, weirdly, to go back to Brink, but one of the things we decided to do in Brink was not to have any narrative or exposition at all. So it's all dialogue. There is no captions at all. But we have what we call tags, which is that as the story progresses, we put in a little like the screen of an iPhone will pop up.
Yeah, I'm with you.
It tags an item. So if they draw a gun, you'll see the tag will appear to tell you what that gun is. If they draw a instrument, so if a character walks in the room, that character is introduced by a little tag. And we started doing it at the beginning of the story, and we just have kept doing it ever since. And what that's allowed us to do is not only keep readers informed as to where we are, what's going on, and who the people involved in the scene are, without having to have that, sort of clunkiness of exposition. So each scene in Brink works much more like a TV show, because we are getting into them later and out of them faster than we would do if we had to do all that business that a comic usually does to explain what's going on in a scene. As a result, also the dialogue is one of my favorite things about Brink. The dialogue is ultra realistic, because it's completely matter of fact. In fact, I underline words in scripts, so the letter will put them in bold for emphasis, and that's a common thing. And that's in Brink. I do that. I use that technique probably about 80% less than I do in everything else. So it's almost flat monotone. There's only a very few words that are put in bold, so that it's got that sense of just people talking normally as if they're just carrying about. There's no kind of dramatic emphasis that you get in a superhero comic. And because of that, and also because nobody has to name each other, because I don't have to go, Batman walks in the room going, "Hello to you, Superman, my old friend. Hello, Batman," and all this kind of stuff, where they name each other for the reader's benefit, which is the standard way you do it. So in Brink, no one does. They talk to each other as normal people do, which is like, "Hello, how are you? I'm all right. What's going on?" No, there's not. I haven't got to sort of try and build clever ways of something to go, "So, Bridget, as you know, what we've been doing at the moment is none of that." But the dialogue is really crisp, and that is a result of using the narrative and using tagging in a different way. In the same way you're talking about, Bendis is using it to simply shorthand all the exposition he would otherwise have to do.
And because there's so many bloody members.
Yeah, well, exactly. So
it's moving, doesn't it?
Yeah, it means that you've only got an amount, Legion of Superheroes has got, 22 pages of real estate every month. Yeah. Brink has only got 5 pages of real estate every week. Yeah. So we get to use the most of that to tell the story without having to spend the same percentage, maybe a fifth of it every time we come back to it, recapping and telling you what's going on. And if you can find methods of that readers accept, and in fact even don't even notice it's being done, I think it's preferable to the idea of going, okay, I'm going to need to put a page up front where I give you a recap so you can then read the next bit. And it's different things work for different stories, but it's lovely when you think of a way that actually works. It works invisibly.
Basically, we've just had a writing masterclass from Dan Abnett, haven't we?
And all based on a
free charge.
Yeah,
I know. And we didn't really talk that much about Vampirella, did we?
Oh, we did. We did.
But we got it in. We got it in
every now and again.
We got it in.
It's a great comic, and I love the fact you've already got chalk and cheese, and with Red Sonja, you're going to pour lime all over it. I like that idea.
That's a very good way of putting it.
And as we always do,
remember to add it to my review of the comic then.
Thank you very much. Yes. I hope you do.
As we always do, Dan, we've gone well over the hour very quickly. Time is the enemy. But thank you so much, mate.
Yeah, Dan the Dreamweaver, thank you very much.
That's going to stick now, Dan Dreamweaver Abnett.
Words are his power. Yeah.
You can see, that's got to go in the write-up for this episode. Well, thanks ever so much, mate. And all the best with everything that you're doing. Vampirella looks brilliant. I'm tempted. I've never picked up a full Vampirella series and read it, but I did pick up the
Paul Davidson one. Yeah.
But I'm really tempted by this. I just love the idea.
Please give it a try. And I say, please also give Red Sonja a try, because I think if Vampirella amuses you, there are moments in Red Sonja that will make you snort with laughter, because there are some great sort of incongruous things that happen in that. But yes, give them both a go. I think it's been a pleasure trying to do something genuinely inventive. With characters, but you think there is that room for them. So I help people enjoy it. But thank you for having me on. Thank you for asking me questions. Thank you for tolerating me talking at length and turning the podcast into a long form feature. But there you go.
It's been fantastic, mate, and hopefully see you again soon.
Yes, please do. Yeah, if you can tolerate me, I'll come back and talk about anything else you care to talk about.
You're always welcome. Anything you want to come on and talk about, just give us a shout, mate, and we'll have you on again.
Great. Cheers, Dan.
Thank you both. Good night. Happy Christmas.
Bye. You
all
too.
The best.
All the
Bye-bye.
best.
Bye.
Run, VT Sam. Oh, no, he's not there, is he?
He's not there. He's gone home.
Do you know, we don't really need to run the VT.
No.
We've gone well over the hour.
Yeah. Just a quick goodbye and see you next week.
Yeah, so, well, I'll see you guys. Ollie won't see you tomorrow, guys. But I will be back tomorrow for a very chilled out Icecast Live with Barry Renshaw, who's a friend of mine who's got a new comic out. And we're just going to be talking about that for an hour. So tune in tomorrow night at 9 o'clock. I'll be there with Barry. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Good night, guys.
See ya.
Bye-bye. How do I stop this? Oh, yeah.